next.
What's going on, and welcome to Pro Football Today post-game show for the Monday night doubleheader. Crazy ending to the Raiders and the Falcons game right there. We have a ton to recap. Let's just run through the Vikings and the Bears. That game ended first, so let's go over that. Vikings 30-12. We see the under hit. Vikings win. They cover. It was 6.5 or 7, whatever it might have been. Let's run through some of these stats. Actually, let's take a big picture look at things, because the Vikings win. They're 12-2. The Lions lost yesterday to the Bills. They are now 12-2 as well. We see the tie top along with the Eagles, all 12-2. Going to be an exciting final few weeks of the season. Moving on, Sam Darnold, 24 of 40 today, 231, the 1 touchdowns and interception. The one passing touchdown went to Justin Jefferson, 7 catches, 73 yards for him. He goes over his receptions, under his yards. We have a ton to get to, not only for this game, but the other game. There's playoff implications with the Atlanta Falcons winning, the Bucs winning, a whole lot to get to. We're coming up against a break right now, so stay tuned on the other side of this break. We'll break both of these games down and look at the upcoming schedule of games. Stay tuned here on SportsGrid Pro Football Today post-game show with myself, Tom Vecchio. See you guys on the other side of this break.
I want the mid-major teams. I want the A-10 to get 3 bids. I want, the Missouri Valley Conference to get an extra bid. I want these teams to go ahead that are 1-bid leagues and give some of these other teams opportunities to make the NCAA tournament. Simply put, folks, when we get to the tournament, we don't care about all these teams that are big-time teams.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all people.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid.
Uncle Stevie can just walk up the aisle like he's at the supermarket. I'll get a starting pitcher here, I'll get a closer here, I'll get a first baseman here, and he'll just keep throwing things in the cart because there is no limit.
Now he's gone, so they got to go get arms to make that team better. Because the bottom line was they were just outclassed by the Dodgers. Let's face it, they got their ass beat.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this, I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text, put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
What's going on, and welcome to Pro Football Today post-game show with myself, Tom Vecchio, running through both Monday night games that just finished. Again, the Vikings 30-12 over the Bears. Falcons coming away with a very late last-second victory, 15-9, looking like a baseball score over there. But let's run through the first game, Vikings-Bears. Let's run through the players. Some takeaways from this game again. Sam Darnold, 24-40, the 231, the 1-1 in the air. Solid game from him overall. There's some important notes that we obviously can take. They're passing at a high volume. They didn't commit as much to the run game as you would expect them to. So Darnold does fall below his passing yards. He does go over his attempts. He does fall below the passing touchdowns, although he could have very easily had a second passing touchdown to TJ Hockenson on that rollout play where he threw the ball with his left hand. I'm personally upset about the TJ Hockenson not scoring, but regardless, we move on to the running backs where Aaron Jones does find his way into the end zone. He was sitting at, it was a minus 120 or so for a touchdown for Aaron Jones, 18 carries, the 86 yards. Truly solid game for him. Add in the 20 yards in the air, and he goes over 100 combined yards overall, hitting both the over on his yards and receiving yards. I say rushing yards and receiving yards. On the other side, DeAndre Swift, honestly, a solid game for him. 19 carries, 79 yards. We saw the Bears move the ball down the field effectively multiple times, and then we got the touchdown call back. We got penalties. We got sacks. Getting them out of field goal range, getting them out of touchdown range, whatever it might be. Truly a solid game from DeAndre Swift, and he probably should have had that 1-yard touchdown. Onto the receivers, we did see a solid game from Justin Jefferson, 773 and 1. It's a good game from him. Obviously, Justin Jefferson has set pretty high standards for himself where he goes over on his receptions, under on the yards, and we do have him cashing in on that touchdown, which was sitting at, was it minus 105 or so? Minus 105 for the touchdown. A solid fantasy day for him as we close out the first week of the fantasy playoffs, so that is a good start. DJ Moore on the other side, 8 catches for 46 yards. I think that's an important note, and generally I've always said that yards are more important, or yards are easy to get to, I should say, compared to getting to receptions, but if we're going to see the Bears offensive line struggle at times and Caleb Williams is not going to have a ton of time to go through progressions and go through reads, getting the ball to DJ Moore often, maybe not for a ton of yards each time, I think it is important to note. So we can be looking at potentially receptions on DJ Moore instead of yards potentially. That's just one thing we could be potentially taking away. We did see the touchdown from Keenan Allen, 682 and 1, a truly solid game from Keenan Allen. Granted, it was a garbage time touchdown, say what you will, but it still cashes bets. It still cashes the props. It's still great from a fantasy perspective. We don't care where the yards or the touchdown comes. We get them from Keenan Allen. So 682 from Keenan Allen. Also on the other side, Jordan Addison, a very, very solid game for him. 763. Didn't get the touchdown. We saw him be, super hot last week, but he goes over on his receptions. He goes over on his yards. TJ Hockenson, the 5 catches, 52 yards from him. He goes over, 46.5 or 45.5 receiving yards for TJ Hockenson, which I spoke about on the pregame show. So he goes over on that. He doesn't get the touchdown. I'm still convinced that play action rollout was designed for TJ Hockenson to get him the first touchdown of the season. Cole Kmet on the other side, under on both of those, 1 catch for 14 yards, only on the 1 target. And overall from the Bears offense, 13 targets to Keenan Allen, 8 to DJ Moore, 7 to Rome Odunze, which is good to see. These are the top 3 options in their offense. That's who the ball should be going to. So at least we have some level of consistency there. On the other side, again, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hockenson, in that order are the main 3 options in their offense. From a passing perspective, Aaron Jones filling out the rest. Didn't touch on Caleb Williams too much. 18 of 31. He continues to take sacks. He did have the passing touchdown to Keenan Allen. It is what it is for Caleb Williams. We obviously saw Tyson Bagent come in there at the very end. All good things for the Vikings. Ultimately, just, again, a super straightforward victory, as we said from them. They needed to come away with this win, especially with the Lions losing. We have an awesome final few weeks of the season, not just for the NFC North, but the NFC number 1 seed overall with the Eagles winning. It's going to be awesome the final few weeks. Let's move on to the other game, which wasn't as exciting. Let's just call it what it was. We all knew this coming in, that the Raiders, down to their 3rd string quarterback with Desmond Ridder, weren't going to be doing too much on offense, and that's basically exactly what we saw from the Raiders side of things. Desmond Ridder, 23 of 38. They had no rushing game. Legitimately no rushing game. So if this is going to be the case, the betting takeaway from this is that Desmond Ridder, he's got some juice on the ground when it comes to running the ball. So a combined rushing plus passing prop for Desmond Ridder would be the spot to go, but also attempts. If the Raiders can literally not run the ball, Mattinson, 7 for 21, Amir Abdullah, 3 for 8, Sincere McCormick, who did get hurt and didn't return, 7 for 8. attempts and yards, we are getting absolutely nothing on the ground. So Desmond Ridder passing plus rushing and Desmond Ridder attempts props may be a spot to go when it comes to the Raiders to close out the season. Didn't see a big game from Brock Bowers. And, you would like to think that they get their best offensive player of the ball. Like, ultimately, he is their number one option on offense. We've seen it throughout the entire season. It doesn't matter if it was Aiden O'Connell in there. It doesn't matter if it was Gardner Minshew. The game plan for the Raiders in the final few weeks should be to continue to get Brock Bowers the ball. At halftime, I did mention Jacoby Myers going over 29.5 receiving yards. He does end with 5 catches for 59 yards. But ultimately, there's not too many takeaways from the Raiders. It is also important to note that they had an extra point blocked. Daniel Carlson had that extra point blocked, and this game ends 15-9, which means we do see the Falcons cover at 5.5 point spread. If they would have kicked that field goal, it would have been within the 5.5, which is an absolutely coin flip of a game, which is why I said on the pregame show I did not want to take the Falcons on the spread. I just have no faith in them covering. And ultimately, they probably shouldn't have covered, but they did. On the other side of things, it was an absolutely horrible passing offense for the Falcons. It truly was. Kirk Cousins, 11 of 17 passing attempts for 112 yards. I said at halftime I was taking under 183 yards. He ends with 112, so we can cash that. 1 passing touchdown, and of course, 1 interception along with some sacks. Drake London had a great start to the game with that long 30-yard reception for the touchdown, so he cashes in on that. I was very excited about Drake London because consistently, he had been getting to 60, 70, 80, if not over 100 yards in this last 4-game stretch when he had 46 targets. He finally finds the end zone. He does fall short of his prop for the Atlanta passing offense. Vinny, if we have the graphics for the wide receivers from this second game, Drake London falls under his receiving prop, obviously scores the touchdown. Only 3 targets from Drake London is obviously a bit of a concern considering the overall passing volume from the Falcons. Now, we can look at this and say, well, they just moved the ball so effectively on the ground. Yeah, Bijan Robinson, 22 for 125, absolutely awesome game from him. Obviously, Tyler Algier playing a bit of a complimentary role, 12 carries for 43 yards. His line was sitting at 15.5 rushing yards at halftime, which I said I was very interested in. He does hit the over on that. I did make a case against Robinson at halftime, just going over 107. I thought was a bit much, but he does break off that long 29-yard run and ends with 125 total. So all in all, an acceptable game from the Falcons. I'm not going to say it's good, and it's definitely not great, but it's an acceptable game from the Falcons considering that they were on a 4-game losing streak. And it was a kind of a similar situation for them and the Vikings where they just needed to come away with the win. So the Falcons more so just because they had been reeling over the past few weeks on this losing streak. They needed to come away with the win, and they did. It was not pretty, but it is an acceptable win, and now they have to. They have to get things going over the next few weeks. And as we talked about on the pregame show, the end of their season is pretty solid. Granted, the Commanders, not the easiest matchup, in terms of a real team. Their defense still has some questions. But they play the Giants next week, then the Commanders, then they close things out with the Panthers. There's a chance for the Falcons to pick up 2 more wins and end the season 9-8, it would be, if they win those 2 games. They're going to need a lot of help when it comes to making the playoffs. They need, obviously, the Bucs to lose, who do control the division, because where they are in the standings right now. We have a whole lot to get to. We'll look forward to the rest of the games coming up on next week's slate. The Thursday game, which we'll, of course, be covering on Pro Football Today for the pregame show. We'll take a look at if there's some division odds posted, whatever it might be. Stay tuned. Other side of this break, more Pro Football Today postgame show with myself, Tom Vecchio. See you guys there.
I want the mid-major teams. I want the A-10 to get 3 bids. I want, the Missouri Valley Conference to get an extra bid. I want these teams to go ahead that are 1-bid leagues and give some of these other teams opportunities to make the NCAA tournament. Simply put, folks, when we get to the tournament, we don't care about all these teams that are big-time teams.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, like, guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid.
Uncle Stevie can just walk up the aisle like he's at the supermarket. I'll get a starting pitcher here, I'll get a closer here, I'll get a first baseman here, and he'll just keep throwing things in the cart because there is no limit.
Now he's gone, so they got to go get arms to make that team better. Because the bottom line was they were just outclassed by the Dodgers. Let's face it, they got their ass beat.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
What's going on, and welcome back to Pro Football Today, post-game show with myself, Tom Vecchio. We just came off of a doubleheader on Monday night. Vikings coming away with the win over the Bears. Falcons coming away with the win over the Raiders. We got to give some love to the pregame show with Adam Kaufman, who did hit his SGP. We can flash it real quick. Up at plus 378 of Vikings alt spread, 2.5-point spread. Aaron Jones to score. TJ Hockenson 40-plus yards. Sam Darnold 225-plus yards. That cashes. So congrats to Adam. That was up at plus 378. My SGP, unfortunately, fell one leg short. Did not see Drake London hit over, but Vikings won. Falcons won. Hockenson goes over his yards. Drake London, unfortunately, does not go over his. Low passing game from the Falcons overall. We are done with these games. Don't want to talk about the Falcons and the Raiders anymore. Vikings are awesome. They continue to roll, and absolutely do not want to talk about the Bears anymore. So let's move on to this upcoming week, which is absolutely crucial for so many teams. And we have some premium games we want to get to. And this is the case that we have at points last week where we had some really good games. And we also had some games where two teams that aren't going to be making the playoffs. What are we going to be talking about that? We have a lot of awesome games this week. Starting off on Thursday night, which is a game which we will be covering on Pro Football Today. Pre-game show on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Broncos at Chargers. Chargers are 3-point home favorites. It's a 42.5 over-under. We saw the Chargers get absolutely stomped last week, or I should say yesterday, by the Bucs. We saw the Broncos come away with the win because the Colts are terrible, and Bo Nix, despite playing awful with 3 interceptions, they come away with that win. So this game's all about the under. It really is. It really is all about the under, and the Chargers are a team that have played to the under this season. The Chargers are also a team that are having trouble moving the ball on offense since J.K. Dobbins has gone down. They have absolutely no running game with Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal. That is not a spot that we want to be looking for production. Ladd McConkey is back for the Chargers, as we saw over the weekend when he caught a touchdown. And yes, he is awesome, but outside of that, there's no other consistent pass-catching option. We did see Stone Smart, their backup tight end, play a bit of a role yesterday because Will Dissly was out. Will Dissly be back on Thursday? Yet to be seen, and we absolutely do not want to be trusting Quentin Johnston or Josh Palmer for catches. So this game is all about the under. And when it comes to the Broncos side of things, this might be a spot where we see Courtland Sutton get fully involved in the offense. And again, this is an important game from a standings perspective as well. Right now, the Broncos are sitting in second place in the AFC West. Not that it's an issue or a concern, because we know the Chiefs are going to be winning that. But the Broncos are holding down the 6th seed overall, 9-5. The Chargers are holding down the 7th seed, 8-6. This is a crucial game for the West, the AFC West. That is not the NFC West as it's flashing right now. But this is a crucial game for the playoffs, and we could see one of these teams on the outside looking in. I'm expecting the Broncos to come away with the win, so I'll be on the Broncos. I'm also going to be on the under. Let's flip to one of these NFC West games because there are so many important factors. And let's actually flip to the Rams at the Jets. Rams 3-point road favorites, 46.5 over under for this game. And we do have those NFC West odds there, which are absolutely important after the Rams coming away with a victory on Thursday night. The Seahawks losing on Sunday night. This is the Rams division right now. I said this a couple weeks ago that the Rams are the best shot at winning this division because we know the Cardinals are frauds and the Rams are starting to click on offense. They have everything going despite not doing a whole lot on Thursday. This is the spot for them. If Mac Jones for the Jags with a completely average offense to begin with, besides Brian Thomas Jr., who's absolutely awesome, if Mac Jones can go out there and torch the Jets for 294-2, you're not going to tell me that Matt Stafford can't put up a minimum of 250 and 2 passing touchdowns, if not pushing towards 300 yards. With what the Rams have at stake, this is a no-nonsense game. Let's get 100-plus yards from Kyren Williams. Let's get 80-plus yards from both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. And let's see Matt Stafford slice and dice this Jets defense. That's where we're going to be at for Sunday. Now, obviously, there are no props posted as of now on Monday night at 11:48, but we will get them throughout the week. And, of course, I'll be tweeting them out as they come around. That's an awesome game we want to be focusing on, specifically from the Rams side of things. Next up, the Texans. The Houston Texans are 2.5-point road favorites visiting the Chiefs. Now, this is obviously because we do not know the status of Patrick Mahomes, who is apparently dealing with a high ankle sprain. It could be a week-to-week situation. We have an over-under sitting at 39.5. I would not be surprised, of course, as a lot of people are suggesting, that Mahomes does not play, and this is solely just due to him getting the rest that he needs, getting him prepared for the playoffs. Why push him out there in a game where I'm not going to say it's meaningless, but it's certainly not a game that they need to be winning because they do have a 2-game lead over the Bills. So, yes, the Bills do own the tiebreaker because the Bills beat them, but it is still a spot where they can give a game away theoretically and allow Mahomes to get healthy. I assume a lot of people will be looking to take the Chiefs because, how many times do you get to take the Chiefs? But we have to remember that could be an offense led by Carson Wentz. And if that is the case, I would expect to see a healthy dose of Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt on the ground to try and control the game overall, limit the potential mistakes from Carson Wentz. So some type of rushing props involving the duo in the backfield for the Chiefs would be my favorite spot to go, of course, once those are posted. Now, one of, if not the most important game on the entire slate, Steelers, Ravens. Ravens are 6.5-point home favorites. It is a 44.5 over under. This game is absolutely massive when it comes to determining the rest of the playoff picture. We're coming up against a break in a minute right here. I want to discuss this game on the other side. The divisional odds for this AFC North, which have already moved dating back to Thursday's show when the Ravens were sitting about plus 175 to win the division. I said you should invest in the Ravens because the Steelers were going to lose at the Eagles, and the Ravens are, of course, going to beat the Giants. Those odds have dropped to plus 125. If you want to bet the Ravens to win the division, you have to do so before this game happens. We have a ton to get to, not only for this, but the rest of the Sunday slate. We have some fun games, despite some of them not being playoff teams. We have some fun games to get to. Lots to break down. Huge Bucs-Cowboys matchup with a 49.5 over-under, which is the highest on the slate. That's where we should be expecting the offense. And, of course, a lot of people looking here for fantasy options as well as we are approaching the second week of the fantasy playoffs. Stay tuned. Other side of this break, Pro Football Today postgame show.
I want the mid-major teams. I want the A-10 to get 3 bids. I want, the Missouri Valley Conference to get an extra bid. I want these teams to go ahead that are 1-bid leagues and give some of these other teams opportunities to make the NCAA tournament. Simply put, folks, when we get to the tournament, We don't care about all these teams that are big-time teams.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
Yeah, this is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid.
Uncle Stevie can just walk up the aisle like he's at the supermarket. I'll get a starting pitcher here, I'll get a closer here, I'll get a first baseman here, and he'll just keep throwing things in the cart because there is no limit.
Now he's gone, so they got to go get arms to make that team better. Because the bottom line was they were just outclassed by the Dodgers. Let's face it, they got their ass beat.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
What's going on, and welcome to Pro Football Today, a post-game show. We're coming off a Monday night doubleheader. Vikings come away with the win. Good stuff from them. Their offense is clicking on all cylinders. Falcons, they won the game. I mean, it's a fact they won the game. It wasn't pretty, but they won the game and stopped their losing streak. We are on to the upcoming week. We have some crucial playoff games. We have the Thursday night game. We have two Saturday games, and we have the Sunday slate, then Monday, of course. We are touching on this Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, which may be the game of the week, and it is absolutely vital when it comes to the AFC North. We saw these teams play back in Week 11. The Steelers came away with the 18-16 victory. I think this game, yet again, is all about the under 44.5. I do not want to take the Ravens at -6.5. I want to take the under. I guess I would have to bet on the Steelers just because I'm not taking the Ravens at -6.5. I want to take the Ravens live in this game. I want to take the Ravens at -2.5 or -3. You would like to say that in historic years, we could just bank on that 2.5 because, of course, Justin Tucker would hit that field goal late in the game and they'd come away with the win. That's obviously not something that is as secure this year just because he has been a little bit off when it comes to his accuracy. Why is this game so important? Because it's largely going to determine the AFC North. When we look at the Steelers' final games, they play the Ravens this week, upcoming. Then they play the Chiefs, and again, the Chiefs may not have Mahomes on Christmas, on Wednesday, the 25th. And then the final game against Cincinnati is not going to be an easy one, considering how well Joe Burrow is playing. On the other side, the Ravens play at the Texans, and the Texans are a good team, but they're certainly not great. And then the Ravens end the season with the Browns, which is a matchup I think we'd all assume that they can win. As I mentioned last Thursday, or a couple days ago on Thursday, the time to bet the Ravens to win the AFC North was before Sunday. And the Ravens were sitting at +175. If the Ravens win this game, the Ravens will not be +125 anymore. The Ravens will be the favorite to win the AFC North. It is a difficult strength of schedule to close things out for Pittsburgh and is obviously much easier for the Ravens. Now, the big news for this is, will George Pickens, the wide receiver for the Steelers, play? He's missed the last two games. We've seen a lack of offense overall from them. That's the note that we want to make for Saturday's slate. Let's move on to some other games. What do we want to touch on? Eagles, Commanders. This is an awesome game. 45.5 over-under. Eagles are 3.5-point road favorites, which seems just a bit too much. I wouldn't be surprised to see this number move. If you are looking to bet the Eagles, I would honestly wait. It is sitting at 3.5. It is -120 at the Commanders side of things at +3.5. You would like to see that number move to 3. You get the Eagles at 3. I doubt it moves all the way to 2.5, but certainly getting them at 3 is a spot to look. And yet again, this game is all about the under. I don't want to look back to, was it just a month ago or so when these two teams played, where we saw a very, very lackluster game from Jaden Daniels overall. But ultimately, the Eagles defense is awesome. And frankly, the Eagles defense has not gotten enough credit this season, at least in my eyes, for what they have done overall. So this game's about the under. This game is about the under, and it's about the Eagles controlling things. Now, there was one report after the Eagles game that Saquon Barkley was dealing with something. He's a little bit banged up, and that's something that I absolutely want to touch on, because we could be looking – I'm not going to say Saquon's not going to play. This is obviously just pure speculation that he was banged up, dealing with a little bit something. There was a report that, but my speculation is that Kenny Gainwell, coming out of the backfield for the Eagles, would be a player that we want to have interest in, a combined rushing plus receiving prop, when we have seen him be able to push towards 40, 50 combined yards. This is a player that could play a role. We know that the Commanders will obviously devote plenty of resources to stopping both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith on the outside, but seeing Gainwell involved in the rushing game, get a few carries, push to 20 yards on the ground, 10, 20 yards in the air, that's something I'm keeping my eye on throughout the week once the Kenny Gainwell props are posted. Moving on, let's touch on the Browns and the Bengals. Let's just close out the AFC North, at least for this slate. The Bengals are 7-point favorites. While we did see a slow game from Jameis Winston and the Browns on Sunday, then we saw DTR step in at quarterback. There's uncertainty when it comes to the Browns quarterback room, who they will be starting. Head coach Kevin Stefanski said that they are unsure. They're not settled on who they're going to be starting at quarterback. Ultimately, it's just about the Bengals. The Bengals technically are still live when it comes to their playoff chances, and if there's any time for them to, strengthen those odds in any capacity, it's going to be Joe Burrow throwing for 250, 300 some odd yards and multiple touchdowns, as he seemingly does week in and week out. So let's just look to Joe Burrow to get Jamar Chase and Chase Brown both into the end zone. He goes for however many yards, close to 300 over his passing attempts as usual. And we do see the Bengals end up covering and the over hitting in this game. Stay tuned. Plenty more coming up on SportsGrid. A huge week of NFL action. Pro Football Today will be back on Thursday for the pregame show for Thursday Night Football. Good luck with your bets.